Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where today's most exciting startup founders share their stories and strategies. They also deliver tangible lessons learned along the way that you can apply to your own startup. Each episode is a true masterclass. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Ahmie Baum. Ahmie, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Kevin, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's already been just an enjoyable kind of pre-chat just for a couple of minutes here, but man, I am anxious to hear your story, and I have kind of, stalked you online and watched other videos you've done, and you've got a remarkable past of just a veritable treasure trove of experience that we're going to try to dive into in the next 25 or 30 minutes. But
Sure.
Before we do, can you just kind of lay the foundation and just tell people a little bit about yourself?
Sure, be happy to. I guess it all started when I was 13 years old, 14 years old, and my father used to have a famous saying that a lot of fathers had. What do you think? Money grows on trees, right? And yet we lived in a middle-class neighborhood, and it certainly looked like there were money trees around. And I don't know. So we obviously didn't have one, and but that started me thinking, and I ended up reading the classic Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And that really got me started in recognizing that. And then a little bit later on in my life, I was I got into college, and I came home and I turned to my dad, "Hey, Dad, I got into college." And he said, "Great, how are you going to pay for it?" I said, "What?" Everyone in my community had money put away, or parents were paying. And so I put myself through college, which basically taking out a lot of loans and working and doing those kinds of things. But at that moment, I also realized that what a lot of the fights and arguments were, candidly, between my mother and father. My father, was on a high wire act without a safety net, and money was, he was a wonderful guy, education. They did have a business, him and his brothers, that went bankrupt decades before. But he really, just didn't have money, and money became a problem that ultimately destroyed the marriage, and then, made it challenging for me, frankly, as I started to go out and live. So, I knew at an early age that, I had to really figure out this money thing. I had to financially, all the other stuff, how do I figure out this money thing? And Think and Grow Rich, started me. There were a lot of things that it said, what your mind can conceive, you can achieve. That was very valuable. But probably the number one piece that I took from it was, if you help enough other people get what they want, then you'll get everything that you want. And that sort of is my mantra, as I continue to do that. So while I was in college, I was running a restaurant with a gentleman whose father was a stockbroker at E.F. Hutton. When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. Yeah. I didn't know anything about stockbrokering. He was 6 months ahead of me. He graduated, said, "I got you a job." I said, "Doing what?" So I interviewed with the regional manager who came in from out of town, and the infamous question, at that time, I guess it still is in these times of interviews, well, what's your weakness? And I said, perfectly candid, I don't know anything about your business, but I can tell you, if you've got a good training program, I can learn. And I'm motivated.
Great answer.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he said. He turned to me and says, "I've never had a 24-year-old. I took the 6-year program out of college, by the way. I never had a 24-year-old turn this around on me so quickly. You're hired." And I then proceeded to learn the stockbroker's world, realized it really wasn't what I wanted. Unfortunately, at the time, E.F. Hutton was also the pioneer of fee-based money management and financial planning and consulting. And so over the course of time, I ended up building a very successful financial service business around helping people get what they want. Initially, it was retirement planning, and then it was estate planning, and then it was investment planning, obviously, with that. And I began to recognize that the business owner was really the one that I had the most fun with and enjoyed the most, and had most of the problems, how to grow the business, ultimately how to sell the business,
Right.
All of those kinds of things. And so fast forward, for 42 years, I worked on Wall Street, different, I was E.F. Hutton. E.F. Hutton was merged with American Express and Lehman. Then I left. One transition, I went from there to Payne Weber. Payne Weber was subsequently bought by the Swiss bank UBS. And on my 65th birthday, I walked away to start Interchange Capital Partners. Now, most people looked at me at the time and says, are you okay? What, you're crazy. But I'm a young 65, now 67 and a half. I believe in, helping other people get what they want. I've got, I'm very passionate about the work that we do. It didn't hurt that my oldest son, when he was a decade earlier, when he was a sophomore in college, said, tell me what happens with the Baum Consulting Group when you're not there. I said, well, I've got some partners. I'll sell it back to the firm. Why are you asking? Because I never, I wanted all three of my kids to do whatever they wanted to do. We were there to support them and help them.
Right.
He says to me, he says, well, it looks like you've done okay for yourself. I might want to follow in that footsteps. So we sort of set this plan up where he got some internships, and then he came to me. He had gotten offers from all kinds of places, and he said, Dad, where's your offer? And I says, well, I have a problem. He said, well, what's the problem? I said, well, I know lots of people who unfortunately have had to live with the albatross of being given something by their parents, and they can never get through that. And for the rest of their life, they're seen as the kid with the silver spoon in their mouth,
Yeah.
Kind of
That's
thing.
so important.
And you wouldn't be able to get successful. And so if I am going to make an offer, these are the ground rules. I'm not going to give you my business. You have to be there first thing in the morning, be the last one to leave, and we will work on a new business idea. It really wasn't new, but it was something that we were able to focus on. And that focus was to be exclusively looking at helping business owners grow and transition, and with that. And then it worked so well. We built a program, because one of the questions was, how do you get a 22-year-old? He was 21. How do you help a 21-year-old or go after that kind of work? So I know you work with a lot of people who are trying to figure out, how do I get started?
Yeah.
And this was, I talked to a lot of people at the time, and this one gentleman, I had heard about this one gentleman in DC who was much older, but I loved his idea. What he did is he went out and asked to interview some of the most successful people in the Washington area. And then he would write up a blurb and put it in a frame and send it off to him. So I turned to Brian, my son, and I said to him, that's what you're going to do. I want you to come up with a list of the most successful people you can think of, whatever you want to do. And within 90 days, he had 100 of these interviews.
Wow.
So this, and it makes perfect sense, because people love to help other people.
Yep.
And people love to tell you their story, and especially the generational issue. When young people come to me all the time and say, how do I get started? I said, well, the first thing you want to do is go talk to some of the most successful people in the field that you're interested in, and ask them, what did they learn? What are the mistakes that they made? Now that they know what they know, what would they do different? What are the opportunities that they see? So that's it. him up very well, set us up very well, so that we could then move out of the Wall Street community into a much bigger community to be able to do more things for these clients. And, you know, our clients traditionally are very significant in their wealth. They have businesses, they've got family issues, they've got ownership issues, you know, and they just can't do it all themselves. So we sit at that interchange between those three systems. We sit at the interchange between the known and the unknown to help protect and grow family capital for that. So that
Not
was
just exits.
Not just exits. It started originally as just exits, but the marketplace and the people said, you know, and I use me as an example. I'm not ready to exit. You know, I'm 67. You would think I'm looking for an exit. I know I want an exit at some point, but I really want, I heard this so often through my career when people, especially men, when they got to that point where they were going to retire, and they did, they said, you know, I've lost my relevance. You know, I'm not relevant anymore. I can, you know, so I don't want to lose my relevance. I want to continue to be relevant and resourceful. So what we recognize is that people want to also grow as well as exit. Certainly they exit because they're interested in financial security and they're interested in making sure, but there's also another underlying piece that's with them. So we work with family businesses at every stage, from beginning to where they're getting started, help growing, ultimately succeed, you know, with that. So we have 4 different divisions. We have our business consulting, where we help businesses grow and scale. We have our family advisory, because when you're dealing with family businesses, it's a lot of moving from generations to generations. There's a lot of family advisory work with that. Then there's the whole suite of family office services, you know, around that. And then we also have an M&A advisory, because clearly when it comes to succession, and there's a need for capital, there's a need for liquidity. And so we've pretty much created a horizontal solution, so that if wherever you are, you can plug into us, and if we can help you, you know, we're more than happy to try to do that. Our whole motto is we want clarity. It's really our brand promise. We want to make sure you have clarity. We'll make sure you have understanding, and we will make sure you move into action and, have an action plan. So Interchange Capital is 2.5 years old, even though it's, as my son said to us when we left on my 65th birthday from UVS, says, yeah, we're like a startup with 42 years of experience. So, you know, so it's been a fun 2.5 years to be independent, and it's been great so far. And we've been able to, you know, help a lot of other people get what they want. And at the same time, you know, we've been able to build our capabilities, build, you know, our confidence and our, with that. So that's the story.
That is, I mean, that is one of the most comprehensive intros I think I've ever had in 250 episodes. But it's interesting because you truly are like, you know, you're preempting the different facets we wanted to go through with the episode, but you like answered those, you know, through the whole thing, because everything you've said, what I really appreciated about the depth of what you said was that you kind of gave the why behind so many of the decisions you made, you know, the paths you took. I mean, I love the whole idea of thinking through, you know, onboarding your son into the business, and what does it look like? You know, what's the best path, you know, to set him up to succeed. You know, when you were talking about, you know, your father saying, there's no money tree here for your school. You got to go make it happen. I mean, nothing happened, you know, everything happens for a reason. And those pieces were in place. You can now look back and think, you know, they were just stepping stones, or building, you know, foundation stones that were laid to give you that 42-year runway.
Yeah.
but you had to put in the graft and
Oh,
the hard work.
right. People look at it, and it's really important that people understand it. I love this idea. You've seen the cartoon that shows someone at the pinnacle, if you will, and and it looks like, oh, they got this straight line, but no, it's a lot of valleys there. If my wife was here, she would tell you, we've been married for 40 years. She would tell you, I can tell you the times that he came home and and it was hard, and it's a story of persistence. It's a story of perseverance, like every entrepreneur, like every successful person. You see the tip of the iceberg. Underneath it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a dedication. You have to have your why. You have to have, there's a great Richard Bach, I think that's the name. It says, you wouldn't be given, God wouldn't have given you a plan. You have a plan, but you're going to have to work for it. Too often, I think people look out there and say, well, just give it to me. Well, you can be given it, but you got to work. You've got to be able to figure it out, which means you're going to have to learn the most important lesson, which is how quickly can you get back up on the horse when you've been kicked off?
And you will get kicked off. That's right.
You will get kicked off. You're going to have ups and downs. And to your point, and everybody will tell you this, the failures is where you learn so much. Success is great. Failures is where you learn a lot.
That's also what you remember the longest. Is
sure.
it's the thing you messed up, but it's the whole idea of I'm thinking of athletes or lottery winners or whatever that just come into a large amount of money, out of nowhere. I mean, 3 years later they're broke again. It's a difficult path. But I wanted to kind of dissect a little bit some of the things you said. I mean, the interesting thing is that the path that you took, kind of built on itself, and it kind of, I guess, revealed itself as you're kind of floating down the river. You never got out of the financial services stream. You never got out of that. Everything was like a need that presented itself, and you thought, well, let's capitalize on this. Let's do this. Even the latest endeavor that you and your son have started. Right. It's exactly. You saw a problem and saw an itch that needed to be scratched, and you did it. So let's talk about that, since in the last 2.5 years. I mean, obviously you had a good foundation, to start with, and you probably had clients, from your other companies that you could work with. But it is, exits. I mean, if you just did nothing but help people exit, that could have probably kept you busy. But you have to do the full service here.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because part of the and I talk to a lot of people. I mentor a lot of people all the time. And, the first question I ask them is, what problem are you going to solve? So it was interesting, because we thought that exit was the problem. It turned out, it was something. It was a problem, but it wasn't the problem that they really had. The problem they really had was, how can they grow the company big enough to get to the exit in some cases? So that was one. The other problem is, how do I get the exit to the next generation? I'm okay, but how do I get it to the next generation? Do I even have a next generation? If I don't have family, do I have a management team? Do I have a strategic partner? So by listening to the market and paying attention to the market and constantly asking, what problem are we solving, and going to the marketplace to ask them, what is it that is your biggest obstacle? What is it that you're losing sleep over? What is it that you can't seem to get done? You keep asking that question over and over and over again to the right people, they're going to tell you. One of my favorite questions, series of questions that I've used, comes from Dan Sullivan. I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Sullivan and Strategic Coach. I've been involved with it for almost 2 decades now. And the Dan Sullivan has these questions. The first one is, if we're sitting here 3 to 5 years from today, what has to happen so that you are going to be happy with your progress personally and professionally? So that's a great question in of itself to get someone to start thinking and talking. But then the next question is, what dangers or fears would you like to eliminate if you could? All of a sudden, now you're getting market intel.
Yeah.
What opportunities would you like to capture over that period of time? And then what are the strengths that you have that you want to continue to develop? That's market research right there. That's how, if you keep asking those questions, you will find problems to solve. And then, as what entrepreneurs do, is they find more efficient and effective ways to solve the problem. So you're right. We started out with this idea, well, it's obvious exit. Everyone, that's their big problem. It is their big problem, but they didn't want to focus on that because it was so far away. It was so involved. They really had to focus on, well, I've got my employees, I've got my customers, I got to make sure that my value is there. Do I have the right people in place? Do I have the right processes? Do I have the right execution? What's my cash flow? Those are the kinds of things that they were focusing on. And until we recognized that, we were frankly missing a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as soon as we realized, oh, let's pull back. And what's great about it is my son was trying to tell me this for a while, and I wasn't paying attention. He said, Dad, you keep talking about exit and succession planning. Yes, it's important. Yes, there's a lot of companies that want that, but a lot of companies are still very much interested in growing and protecting as well. So, part of being an entrepreneur is paying attention and looking at the market, figuring out what problems there are to solve, and then don't stop, because that's the beauty of entrepreneurism. That's the beauty of, this whole process, is to be able to go out there and keep solving problems, helping other people get what they want with your skill set and with what we call your unique ability,
right,
which is one of the things. I know we're going to get to some stuff at the end, but that's going to be one of them, trying to identify what it is that you were put on this earth for. You weren't put here by accident, in my opinion.
Yeah,
there's a much grand design here. Yeah. You have to figure out, well, what was I put here? What are the things that I'm passionate about, that I love to do, that I would do for free if someone didn't pay me for? And every one of your listeners and every one of your viewers have it, but they just don't pay attention to it. They sort of get caught in the 9 to 5, well, yours don't, because they're starting to recognize that there's, another way of viewing things.
Yeah. There's a book called Halftime by a guy named Bob Buford that talks about moving from success to significance.
Correct.
At the end of the process. And one thing I hadn't really thought about until you mentioned it earlier is or at least you talked around it anyway, about that whole idea of, it's not just succession planning, it's not just exit, it's also kind of coaching business owners on what does the next phase of life look like. I mean, it's like you're a life coach too. I mean, you're a mentor. You're coaching them on what their next phase looks like when they don't have their hands in the middle of their business type thing. So, is that a big part of it?
That, and then also the next generation.
Yeah, for sure.
And helping them identify what their strengths are, what their opportunities are. And then, the work that I enjoy the most is the family advisory space, where you're really helping both generations. One generation is getting ready to let go, and generally willing to let go very carefully, with a lot of trepidation. Some of them never let go. And then you've got the younger generation who's chomping at the bit, with all kinds of energy and enthusiasm, but with their own fear. Do they really know how to do that? And then helping both of that generational work be able to do it, because a lot of times, and we see this often with multifamily generational businesses, if you start bringing in the next generation, you've got more mouths to feed.
Yeah.
And if you're not growing your business, you've got that issue. So yeah, coaching is a very, we call it consulting coaching. There's no doubt in trying to help people to get what they want is a major portion of what we do at Interchange Capital Partners.
They may not have even ever been asked that question. They may have never really even thought about it. They just assumed that, well, now it's time to golf, fish, play with grandkids, whatever. But yet,
and for some, that's
hard.
I talked to one gentleman. He says, that's all he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But he was in the minority. Yeah. Most people, as I said, when they retire, they regret. They regret it. Their identity is tied up in the business.
That is so true.
Everything around that. They start worrying about money more. So, one of the nice things about owning a business, you hear it all the time. Well, I can always go get another customer, kind of thing. I can always create a new widget. I can find a new service. I mean, I'm all, so the financial security aspect of retirement, becomes, and it's interesting because you used to think there was a threshold, but I've been doing this long enough. I can tell everyone out there that people who make tens of millions of dollars still don't have financial cash. They don't feel finacially secure, with it. It's
all relative.
It's all relative.
All relative. Exactly. Yeah. Well, you have already kind of done this throughout the entire podcast, but I really want to kind of hone in a little bit and really drill down on just one or two, this is kind of our mentor moment segment of the podcast, but just over the course of time, over the course of your experience, I mean, there's always, 3 or 4 things, but I just let's focus on maybe the top 2 things that you think of right now that you think would really help, leaders, founders, CEOs, just somebody that's starting a company and trying to lead a team to accomplish good things. What are 1 or 2 things just really come to mind?
The first thing is clarity. You need to have clarity. You need, I had clarity from an early age. Money didn't grow on trees. I don't buy that BS, Dad. I'm going to go I'm going to figure out how somebody did it. So that was in the beginning. And then, but as time goes on, having clarity around what it is that you want your life to look like. We are the creators of our life. I was having a conversation yesterday, and someone said, worrying about, the future and how bad the markets and wars and this and the future and the world's going to come to an end. And I says, you know what? If you keep talking that way, your world will come to an end. I don't talk that way. I look out there in the world and create the world that I want. And the way you go about creating the world that you want is first and foremost to have clarity. So that's the first step. You must have clarity. Now, sometimes in order to have clarity, once you have clarity, then you need courage. Because sometimes you're going to say, oh my God, it took, I didn't realize it at the time, but it didn't sort of ridiculous amount of courage to walk away from this huge safety net that I had built for 42 years and go start Interchange Capital Partners. So clarity.
You're one of those guys who are afraid you're going to run out of money. That's what it was.
We all worried we run out of money. You want it with it. So clarity is most important. Having the courage to be able to make the decision is something that, and it was easier for me because at that moment I had my wife and my kids and I had people around me to help support. A lot of times you'll hear people talk about, oh, don't tell anybody about your dreams and your aspirations. And that's nonsense. Tell people about it. Get the support that you need for that. And then the last piece that I would give to you is that concept of unique ability. You are very special. You have to find your special sauce. What's your special sauce? What it is that's unique to you. And what's interesting about that is what is unique to you, you don't even acknowledge. You dismiss it.
Yep.
You think, oh, everybody's got it. Or you get angry at somebody else because they don't do it a particular way. And really what's happening is, well, that's your unique ability. You know how to do this, and they're not doing it. So instead of you getting angry with them for not doing it your way, understand that's your unique way of doing. That's your secret sauce. You're special. And so the advice I would give to people is, first, recognize that it's something that you're very passionate about, something you would do for free, something that energizes you. So you can take a look at everything that you do. And if you walk away feeling more energized, then you know, oh, that's part of my unique ability. If you walk away and you got a backache and your stomach's turning and you got a headache and you got to run to the bar to get a drink, guess what? That's not your unique ability. So the best lesson is start identifying those things that are not your unique ability. Too often people try to go to, well, what's my purpose? What's my unique ability? And I learned that if you can start Xing, well, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, not, oh, it's this. Oh, it's this. And then start to make that commitment that you're going to spend 80% of your time in that unique ability space.
Like the
what is it
principle,
that you are uniquely able to do,
Yeah.
that you're passionate and love to do for that? So clarity, courage is always important. And then what is it that you're uniquely able to do? And then find the biggest problem that you're comfortable out there to solve.
What a way to wrap us up today. What a great chance just to sit down and I mean, I felt like we've kind of dipped into a pretty deep well here today, and this is I think this is just the first scoop out of the well. We're gonna have you back on, because I know you've got a lot more stories and anecdotes that would certainly be helpful to our audience. But I just want to thank you for taking time today and just sharing your story, and really, like I said, just that we just now have heard the tip of the iceberg of the Baum legacy, that we'd like to hear the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say later. But yeah, Ahmie, thank you again for
Kevin,
just being on.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope that your listeners and viewers found some value in it, and I'm sure you'll let them know how to reach me if they need to or want to. So
we'll certainly do that.
Just tell them to make sure they heard, just so that I know, because people call. Just make sure when they reach out that they mention your name and Rising Tide, so that I know where it came from.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Ahmie, and just once again for just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Another episode in the books. We hope you heard some great takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on iTunes and YouTube. As always, thanks for listening to Rising Tide.